And finally, 5% of your grade comes from mechanics and grammar. So what are mechanics and grammar? First, this is literature, so when you're reading about literature, it's always happening because it's in a book, it exists in its own reality, and you want to particularly stay within the same verb tense in the same sentence. So there are going to be some times when you have to break that rule about using present tense, but never break it within a sentence. So always make sure you're maintaining the same verb tense within a sentence. You want to make sure that anytime you use a pronoun, it's clear what that pronoun refers back to. Students usually understand pronouns like he, she, and they, so I want to know who he or she is, who are they. But many students also really struggle with the word it. It shows that the author is trying to do this. It shows, and sometimes what you substitute for it is this quote shows. Neither it nor this quote is specific enough. What you should do instead is be really clear, explicitly clear about what it or what part of that quote is. So instead of this quote shows, you could say, the author's repetition of this specific word, and then include that specific word, demonstrates, and then tell us what that's doing. Or the author repeats blah, blah, blah to emphasize its significance. So make sure that your pronouns are really clear. And this one, though it is listed under mechanics and grammar, this will actually also help you to develop your analysis. You want to watch out for errors in subject-verb agreement. Your subjects and your verbs should agree in number and in gender. You also want to watch out for errors in pronoun antecedent agreement, so make sure that when you're making that pronoun clear, you're using the correct antecedent or word that the pronoun refers back to. Make sure that all of your sentences express a complete thought, so they're not fragments and they're not run-ons. If it feels like it's going on for a very, very long time, you may want to reread that sentence and edit it to make sure it's not a run-on. If it feels like you haven't finished your thought or something is missing, you want to edit it and make sure it's not a fragment. Also be careful with misplaced modifiers or confusing modifiers. When you're adding any words or any phrase to give additional information or to limit the scope of a word, you want to make sure that that modifier is as close as possible to the original word and that it's really clear to your reader which word it's supposed to be modifying. Also, don't use contractions. So instead of don't use contractions, you would say do not use contractions. Check your spelling. Don't just rely on the spell check. Remember that often we miss words that are spelled like other words. So for example, to, the number is spelled differently from to directional and differently from to intensifying. Intensifying T-O-O, directional T-O, number T-W-O. A spell check wouldn't catch that, but it still would be considered a spelling error. Watch your punctuation. Make sure that you understand how to use different punctuation marks. And be careful with teacher requirements. So I am going to ask you to do things like use MLA format, use Times New Roman, size 12 font, double spaced, use margins that are no bigger than 1 inch, and we'll go over all of that. But if I give you a requirement, you need to follow it or you are going to lose some points.